Wednesday, July 3rd. Again today, German bombing planes launched a daylight raid on the British Isles. During the night, Nazi planes had carried out their most ferocious raids on England thus far, and British planes bombed many objectives in Germany. The Balkans are quieter, but Romania faces a cabinet crisis. Parliament reconvenes in Bucharest, and senators and deputies from the Bessarabian and northern Bukovinian areas, ceded to Russia, want to know why the legislative body wasn't called into session immediately. Now the news from Europe Direct, London, Berlin, and Rome. First, a report from the British capital by Eric Sevareid. Go ahead, London.
This is London. The German bombers followed up the raid on the northeast coast last evening, when 12 were killed and 123 injured, with another raid in southwestern England this morning. According to the official statement this morning, it was a raid at random, and no serious damage was done. Early today, one raiding bomber was shot down by planes of the Fighter Command. British communiques, which follow these daily and nightly bombing raids, contain no details about the exact location of the damage nor the kind of damage inflicted, except when homes and schools are hit and civilians killed. So up to the present, the British public is unaware of what kind of military objectives the German raiders are concentrating on. That's information which probably would give some clue to German strategy for their expected assault on this country. Another offensive against what are commonly known in England as the Men of Munich was set underway last night by leaders of 400,000 railway workers. The Executive Committee of the powerful and conservative National Union of Railway Men unanimously passed a resolution in which they requested all cabinet ministers and other important officials associated with the policy of the last government be removed at once from office. Britain has gained at least one advantage from the collapse of one continental state after the other, a moral advantage. She has learned, or should have learned, the lessons of Prague, of Belgium, and of France, that the danger of surrender lies not with the people, but with elements in their government. Chamberlain, Halifax, or Samuel Hoare still retain positions of influence. But the press daily proclaims that these men, even if they wish, cannot undermine England's determination to fight on. More than 50,000 British mothers and fathers have shown their desire in writing that their children be sent away to the Dominions. Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret will stay. We're told this morning that the King and Queen have turned down the suggestion that the royal children seek safety abroad. There are 9 million children in this country. While the day of a possible German attack draws closer, the arguments about child evacuation overseas continue. The first contingent of 20,000 children has not yet started to move. But 4,000 children are leaving London today for safety in Western England. Individually, English families are leaving the country, and French families are still arriving in England. It's estimated 10,000 French civilians arrived last week. Many were the owners of chateaux along the Loire and expensive apartments in Paris. When the savings they manage to take out expire, they will be bankrupt. Refugees from France are the only persons allowed to cash franc notes in British banks. They are given printed forms and allowed to cash up to 20 pounds in francs each week at the going rate. British families are keeping French families in their homes and receiving £1 a week from the government to meet the cost of billeting. The idea of civilian defense against invading Germans is taken quite seriously in this country. Last night, Edward Murrow told you about the 60-year-old mother-in-law lying prone in her front yard, practicing rifle fire on a tomato can. While other housewives are filling eggshells with ammonia, sealing them up and filling their cupboards. Today, a newspaper columnist gives the following instructions for making the Molotov cocktail, or homemade incendiary grenades. Here's how it's done. You fill a beer bottle with equal parts of paraffin and liquid tar. Add a dash of gasoline, cork the bottle, and tie cotton wool around its neck. Just before you toss it in the direction of an on-rushing German tank division, you moisten the cotton with gas and set it on fire. You've got to throw it hard enough to break the bottle. This is CBS in London, returning you to Columbia in New York.
That was Eric Sevareid reporting from London. This is New York, and here's the latest news from the Far East. In Tokyo, Japanese army leaders have presented to the cabinet a formal statement disagreeing with Foreign Minister Hartrich's statement of last Saturday on Japan's new foreign policy. The Army men say that Hartrich's remarks were too mild and too conciliatory to the democratic nations. We've listened to the reports from London. In just a moment, we'll take you to the German capital for the reports from there by Columbia's correspondent in Berlin. Following that, we will hear from Rome. Now to the German capital, Edwin Hartrich reporting. Go ahead, Berlin.
Good morning. This is Berlin. The police president of Amsterdam has ordered that all non-Aryans who left Germany between the period from January 1st, 1933 to March 1938 to report to the police headquarters within 8 days. This will mean that all German Jewish refugees who've been waiting in Amsterdam for entry visas to other countries are once again under the direct surveillance of German police authorities. At the time of the Blitzkrieg, which began on May 10th, there were many thousands of these people caught in the Low Countries. Folks Shabir this morning has an interesting comment on the expulsion order issued yesterday against Dr. Hartrich, the correspondent for the Swiss paper Neue Zürcher Zeitung. The Berlin paper states, quote, Dr. Hartrich was ordered to leave Germany within 24 hours because he attempted to poison the relations between Germany and Russia by spreading lies. Expulsion takes place in the interests of Switzerland herself. The press of that country would endanger the existence of its own country if such a campaign of lies would be tolerated in the future. End of quote. In the editorial columns of the same paper this morning, there is an article on German-Latin American relations. It discusses the Latin American press, which is hostile to the German Reich. The paper states that Jewish immigrants, plus the interventionist propaganda in the United States, are mainly responsible for this critical attitude. The paper states, quote, up until now we were silent about this development, which is very dangerous for its participants. First, because it is not our business to interfere with the interior situation of countries whose governments are stressing the need of friendly relations with National Socialistic Germany. And continuing, the Berlin paper writes, quote, we have an understanding of the heavy economic damage caused by this war, started by France and England, that is inflicted on the Latin American states. And this gives rise to some irritation, which must be expressed in some fashion. But with the press so strongly, so frequently misused to ventilate this ill humor, it is time to give a warning. In spite of the attempts of the American President Roosevelt to organize something like an American blockade against Europe, reasonable circles in South and Central America will recognize after this victorious ending of the war that the Latin American republics will have to rely on Europe, a new Europe organized by Germany, and not the reverse. End of quote. The paper concludes with a statement that Germany will never forget its friends, nor those who have shown it malice and ill will, regardless where they may be in this world. The general report of the High Command summarizing the military campaign against France is the big news in the papers this morning. The high points of the successive thrusts, first to the Channel coast, then southward, which resulted in the capture of Paris and the smashing of the Maginot Line, are emphasized. In this report, the High Command gives the German casualties since May 10th. The official figures are 27,000 dead, 18,000 missing, and 111,000 wounded, for a total of 156,000 casualties. The papers stress the fact that these official figures are surprisingly low, considering the scope of the operations. The Deutsches Allgemeine Zeitung comments briefly in a subheadline, quote, the almost unbelievable small losses, unquote. The official report also tells us that 792 German aircraft were destroyed or lost in these operations up to June 4th. Other high points of the High Command report are 1,900,000 French troops were taken prisoners, including 29,000 officers and 5 Army commanders. German submarines sank 493,000 tons of enemy shipping in the Blitzkrieg period. And up to June 5th, German aircraft damaged 3 enemy cruisers, 1 destroyer, and 25 merchant ships, while sinking 40 other merchant vessels. Then the report ends with a brief sentence, and now there is only one enemy left, England. This is Edwin Hartrich. I return you now to Columbia in New York.
From Berlin to New York and back to Europe for the latest news of developments reported by Cecil Brown from the Italian capital. Go ahead, Rome.
This is Rome. A strong British attack on Metama in Italian East Africa was repulsed, according to the bulletin just issued by the Italian High Command. The communique says that more than 60 British dead were left behind, as well as machine guns and ammunition. The Italians say their losses were slight. An air attack on the same point, the bulletin reports, was driven off as 2 British planes were shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Italian planes also raided the British Air and Naval Base at Aden at the eastern end of the Red Sea. Aden has been subjected to almost daily attacks by the Italians. For the first time in many days, no mention is made of any activity on the Libyan-Egyptian frontier. The Italian and French armistice commissions are meeting today at Turin, in northern Italy, near the frontier. They are discussing the methods by which France will fulfill the terms of the armistice and also dismantle the naval bases in the French possession. The Italian commission is headed by General Pinto and includes an admiral, a general of the Air Force, and Count Vitezzi of the Italian Foreign Office. No details of the progress of the discussions have been released. Mussolini sent a letter to the Prince of Piedmont, heir to the Italian throne, which claims great victories for the Italian troops on the Alpine front. The Duce says the fascists broke through the Alpine Maginot Line and in the face of a heavy snowstorm penetrated from 5 to 20 miles into French territory. Mussolini praised the Italian troops in the highest possible terms and description. He said they had to fight for several hours, even after the armistice, because the French kept resisting. So it's presumed that part of the Italian advance was made after the official time for laying down arms. Mussolini reports that the fight was hard and caused many casualties. He says thousands of men were put out of action and announced that the list of dead and wounded would be published. The injured are in hospitals throughout the country. I understand that many of them have frozen feet. Italy's great hero, Marshal Italo Balbo, was buried today in Tripoli, the capital of Libya, which he did so much to develop. Balbo was killed when his plane was shot down over Tobruk in Libya last week. Almost every city in Italy is naming a street or a square after the fascist leader. 75th Legion of the fascist militia will now call itself the Italo Balbo Legion. The first complete list of civilian casualties from British and French raids in this country was published today. 91 persons have been killed from June 11th to June 30th. 77 of them died from airplane bombing. 4 were killed by splinters from Italian anti-aircraft batteries. In this same period, 392 persons were injured, and 339 of those were from bombs dropped by English and French air raiders. Italy has a civil mobilization law which enables the government to conscript for civil duty everyone between the ages of 14 and 65. Today it was announced that all newspapers and Italian journalists are now subject to the law. This puts every Italian journalist directly under the control of the government, and it makes him subject to the rigorous penalties for failure to do his duty under civil mobilization. The papers today continue to present a picture of the tremendous blow about to fall on England. Dispatches from Berlin indicate that the attack on England will be in conjunction with an Italian attack on the British possessions in the Mediterranean and North Africa. The fascist press reports from San Sebastian, Spain today that there are strong differences in the internal councils of Britain. The Popolo di Roma reports that some sections of the British cabinet want peace. The British industrial interests, the report adds, are in favor of an immediate armistice. Signor Bastianini, the Italian ambassador who was sent to England only a few months before the outbreak of war, returned to Rome this morning. This is Cecil Brown in Rome, returning you now to Columbia in New York.
And with this news from Rome, we conclude this morning report of European developments presented by Columbia each morning at this time and each evening at 6:45 Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Eric Sevareid reported from London, Edwin Hartrich from Berlin, and Cecil Brown just reported from Rome. Larry Elliott speaking. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.